afternoon. This is the regular meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Today is February 5th, 2018.
Roll call. President Lal.
Here.
Commissioner Evanesian.
Here.
Commissioner Hale.
Here.
Commissioner Camargo.
Here.
And Commissioner Kadikian.
Here.
Okay. 2 is consent items. A, approval of the minutes for the December 4th, 2017 meeting.
I just have a couple of spelling corrections, but other than that, nothing. I can just hand those to you. Okay. I don't have any substantive comments. Commissioners?
No comment.
So do we have a motion to approve with...
So moved.
Okay. With spelling corrections? Okay, great.
Okay,
Next item?
3 is GWP Commission staff comments.
Any commissioners have comments at this point?
No comments from me? None, thank you.
Madam Clerk?
4A is legislative update.
Good afternoon, President and members of the Commission. My name is Silva Ugrulian. I'm the Senior Administrative Analyst for Glendale Water and Power, and I'm here today to give you a brief legislative update. The legislature reconvened on January 3rd, and since then there's been a flurry of activity. At the moment, we're continuing to focus on cap and trade. The California Air Resources Board released its rulemaking schedule, which has set a very aggressive implementation schedule that needs to be completed by the end of the year, and we continue to support California's cap and trade program, including continuation of existing elements that protect against significant ratepayer impacts. And the governor announced in his cap and trade spending proposal and a new executive order to promote the adoption of zero emissions vehicles, and the governor's $1.25 billion cap and trade spending proposal focuses on multiple areas, including energy efficiency, healthy forests, and low carbon transportation. And the plan is now going to be reviewed by the legislature. They also are concerned about the impacts from recent wildfires and what can be done to prevent them. The Senate Energy Subcommittee on Gas, Electric, and Transportation Safety convened last Friday. During a 4-hour-long hearing, they discussed different ways in which we can prevent utility-caused wildfires, and they were examining best practices for utilities to follow to prevent wildfires in ways such as vegetation management programs, fire mapping, and physical security efforts, as well as intercity and county coordination efforts to address risk prevention and response, as well as mutual aid assistance efforts. February 16th is the last day for bills to be introduced, and spring recess begins upon adjournment, which is March 22nd. And this is all that I have for my legislative update for you today. We're continuing to watch any bills that come up on an ongoing basis, and I will be sure to report back as soon as any changes occur or potentially affect Glendale Water and Power. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
You indicated about the cap and trade 1.2 billion proposal, and it included some solar. Any ideas what components or solar we're talking? Are they presenting ideas about ways that cities could use those particular programs, or what is it exactly about is the question?
I did read about new solar home partnership programs, but I can look into it to see if there is anything that would include Glendale.
I see. Okay.
Any other questions from the commission?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item.
4B is a Water Division Sustainability Report.
President Law, members of the Commission, I'm Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water at Glendale Water and Power. And I was going to give a report today on, I call it Water Division Sustainability, but I'm going to grab the mouse. Up at the podium. And I think one thing that's important that I speak about is really GWP was an adopter of sustainability really before that was a term that I think was in the vernacular that people used in the current way. You know, and what I've got here is a picture, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but this is from a feasibility study for what became the LAGWARP, LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant. I mean, it's even so old that it was the Glendale, LA Water Reclamation Plant in this picture. You know, and when I talk about sustainability and when I talk about it in this report, I'm using the term sort of nowadays when people talk about sustainability, but really, you know, implicit in everything we do at the utility is really keeping the utility sustainable. You know, ensuring that we have water for all of our customers all the time. And, you know, like when I've spoken to the commission before and I bring some of my staff, you know, to have sustainability, especially in a water utility, is you have to have people that know how to run the utility, that are experienced, that, you know, in our case, you have the right licenses for the state. You know, you have your engineering staff, you have customer service, you know, you have billing and rates, you know, because having rates and having that revenue makes it possible to have a utility that we're used to having. So, you know, when I think about sustainability, you know, that's really something that's implicit in that overall discussion.
So what is shown on this slide?
Yeah, this is
can't see.
it's an artist rendering of the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant.
Okay.
We ultimately became that, and it looks pretty close to this rendering, which basically is the wastewater treatment plant that serves the city of Glendale and is co-owned between Glendale and the city of Los Angeles. And to be honest, it really does, how it ultimately turned out, look like that. I think one thing that's new is there's covers over the basins now to keep odors and things like that down. And so to talk about that more, so really as early as 1968, both cities worked together on a regional reclamation facility that became LAGWARP. You know, we cooperate with the city of LA regionally. As like even in 2015, we ran a main to Betty Davis Park that comes off of Glendale's recycled system and serves a park that's in the city of Los Angeles. And you know, we worked together on our salt and nutrient management plan for the Ulara Upper Los Angeles River area basin, which is related to recycled water because it looks at the water quality and how the groundwater quality might change with the use of recycled water and spreading water and things like that. So again, I just want to make that point. I mean, we don't come out and do a press release about something we did in 1968, right? But it is sustainability and things like that that the utility's done for a very long time. And again, so after that feasibility study, in 1976, the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant was completed, and the first recycled water use in the city of Glendale was in 1978, so like 2 years after that. And then in the early 90s, there were two really large projects that the city did to expand our system. One's called the Forest Lawn Project, which is kind of that dedication ceremony with Mayor Bradley from the city of LA there in that picture, part of the groundbreaking. And, you know, since that time, we've invested over like $20.3 million in our recycled water system. And in 2016, about a little over 7% of our water demand was supplied by this local resource. You know, and one thing that's really important to note about the recycled water even if there is a drought or water shortages or things like that, it doesn't affect the recycled water. That's a supply that's always available. Because the source basically is wastewater, right? So there's always a continuous supply of wastewater available for these types of projects. You know, and basically as an overview on our recycled system, so we got about 21 miles of recycled water mains, 6 pump stations, 5 storage tanks, 78 meters. So, you know, some customers have more than 1 meter, like Disney has several meters. Glendale City College has several meters. You know, and the uses include irrigation, cooling, dual plumbing, and dust control. And again, in Glendale, it's like one of the agencies that maybe has very early use of dual plumbed buildings at Glendale City College. And, you know, the difficulty with the dual plumbed buildings is you have to have staff that understand that there's really 2 different water sources sort of inside even the restroom, and you can't just tap in to one. You got to know which pipe you're tapping into so it doesn't go to the sink, basically, things like that. So and this map out of our current recycled system, you know, I talk about if someone wanted to know like how many mains and how many pipes we have in our potable system, you could literally just take the map of the city and know that there's a pipe in every street, right? Because there has to be a pipe or a main, a potable main in front of every house, in front of every business. Whereas on the recycled, it's a lot different. These are literally the mains. That's it right there. It's more like a skeleton. And that's because the recycled system focuses on very large users, typically irrigation for the most part. So the way the system's laid out is to get to where we have those known uses and those large uses that are available. And then I'm showing in the future system, basically a project that we just completed the major construction on, the Hoover-Keppel Toll project, to get recycled water up to those schools. And many of the LA Unified School or Glendale Unified Schools have recycled water already, and those 3 didn't. And then we've got 3 other projects after that, basically up to Camino San Rafael, and then up to Chevy Chase Golf Course is kind of the last leg. And then the part we call the Glendale T, that's to have some more recycled water downtown. And really for us operationally, it's kind of to loop those 2 ends of the systems or connect them, which will help us with our operations.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify that? You said to loop the 2 ends?
Yeah, if I go backwards, so if you see on Monterey Road and Glen Oaks Boulevard, there's a big gap right there. And then there's like no north-south piece kind of between Colorado and that area. So when we call it the T, it's just because it's shaped like
I see. Okay.
just because it's shaped like a T, that connects that all together and loops those.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And operationally for us, that's important because then you could, if you do maintenance on some of the tanks or something, you could turn off a valve but still supply kind of the other half. If that makes sense. And then on this we show our connection with the city of Pasadena. So when, even back in 1968, and the subsequent environmental documents for Lagwarp were put together, it included having some of that recycled water go to the city of Pasadena, because that helped with the Clean Water Act funding that the cities got to help build Lagwarp in the early 70s. So after the Clean Water Act was passed, there was federal funding available to do projects like that. So having regional projects and showing uses for that water helped, I guess, move you up in the priority to get that grant funding. And so that Pasadena project has always been part of our recycled water plans, even to the extent that the facilities from Lagwarp and then in Glendale on that west side are already sized to serve that Pasadena demand. So the pipes are essentially larger than they would have been if it was just for Glendale's demands. And Pasadena contributed capital money at that time, back in the early 1990s, to make those facilities bigger.
Can you please explain how that is beneficial to Glendale?
It's beneficial to the extent is that that water is available from our share of the treated water from Lagwarp. And Pasadena contributed about $6 million to help expand the system at the time it was built. And then ultimately, there's a city of Pasadena is going to pay for all the costs related to pumping, O&M, all those things, and then some kind of like overhead costs related to that as well. So overall, I mean, the major benefit would be covering some of our O&M, basically, for that, as well as Pasadena, as part of the agreement, when we have to do major rehabilitations that you would capitalize instead of doing O&M, but they're really like an O&M project. Pasadena pays a proportionate share for those costs. So say like recoding some of the recycled water tanks. When we go to do that, Pasadena will contribute to the cost of doing that recoding.
So it's a mixture of O&M and also capital costs, original capital costs.
It's a mixture of, yeah, it's definitely original. I mean, they've already contributed to that.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, from an accounting perspective, even when you're doing O&M, some of that has to be capitalized versus expensed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they cover, I mean, it's included in both of those cases, yeah.
And the AFY, the unit under the numbers?
Oh,
what does that stand
acre
for?
feet per year, it's 325,900 gallons.
Acre feet per year.
Yeah. And then that one would be in a year, right? So it would be that total amount for a year. Yeah, it's 325,900 gallons. And the reason, so when we talk about recycled water, we talk about potable water, when we do our purchases, we use acre feet. Just, it makes the number smaller, right? It's easier to do the math. And, you know, on your bills, it's hundreds of cubic feet, which is another unit. And the reason for using that unit is it makes the cost per unit make sense. You know, it's like, whatever, $2 and something. Yeah, yeah, it'd be fractions of a penny, so. And then, and this is pretty much my last point. So, you know, when we talk about sustainability and talk about energy and things like that, you know, there's this thing, and as a water utility manager, you know, I've been very cognizant of this since I started, but that term water energy nexus didn't come about until just a few years ago, because I think, you know, my counterparts on the electric side said, hey, wait a second, a lot of our energy goes towards pumping water, but from the water side, of course, we know that. So one example, again, and this is something that GWP put in a generator at our Jim Res pump station back in the 1980s. You know, so, I mean, a very early adoption of this sort of technology. And basically what this is we have a Metropolitan Water District connection here that can supply water to 2 different pressure zones within our system. And one of the pressure zones is lower than the pressure that the MWD water comes at. So we run it through these energy recovery turbines. And since 2008, and the only reason I use 2008 is that, I mean, I have data from that point on from our SCADA system. It's almost 3 million kilowatt hours that we've generated at that facility. And basically there at the facility, we use it to offset the pumping costs to pump water up to the higher pressure zones. And you know, that gets to that whole thing when I talk about, you know, it's 8.3 pounds per gallon. We deliver about 41 tons of water to an average house every month. You know, and that, to me, that's kind of the crux of that nexus. I don't know if that's redundant, but, you know, the water energy nexus, part of that is the water's heavy. So you have to use energy to deliver it to the houses. And in this case, we're able to use that same thing to our advantage to generate some electricity. So,
I've never heard water talked about in terms of weight, and it's very startling to see those numbers.
yeah, I mean, the thing I think about is, not that I recommend this, if you get, you know, a 2.5 gallon bottle,
Mhm.
right? And have to put it in your trunk and carry it to the house and put it in the cupboard, right? That's like weightlifting,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so,
So question by percentage, about what percentage, either in city of Glendale or state of California, what percentage of electricity is consumed moving water?
I know there's some numbers out there like statewide, and I wanted to see, was it a 20%?
That's about what I've heard previously
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
It's a big number.
Yeah, for us, I know that the water division is one of the largest electric customers in the city of Glendale. So, again, one of the advantages is this one facility is basically we call it the hydraulic grade line, but the pressure that we get our met water at kind of comes at a good pressure that's sort of in between a couple of zones and all that. So we might be using less energy per acre foot maybe than some other agencies that have to pump it all the way up. And a case in point would be our neighboring agency, Crescenta Valley Water District, and some of the other agencies that get their MWD water from Foothill Municipal Water District. It's all pumped. So they get the water from Met, they have to pump it up basically up there to like the La Crescenta area, right? So even for us, the Met water we get's at the same HGL that they get it, but all of their territory, I guess, all of their surface territory is at that higher elevation, whereas we have a lot of surface territory down here by the Civic Center, right? The biggest part of our area is down at this lower elevation. So those agencies, the amount of energy in their water is higher pretty much altogether. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's just that they're at a higher elevation and they got to pump it.
Right.
Yeah.
So very good update. So my observation and question, I guess, would be, so sounds like where you're headed is, you know, linking a couple of systems here for greater efficiency, but it seems to me that in the foreseeable future, the intent would be to continue to use recycled water for things like irrigation, dual plumbing where you can use dual plumbing, that sort of thing. My understanding is there's a water agency in Orange County that also uses recycled water to recharge their aquifers, and that actually then you know, eventually works its way into drinking water. Are there any thoughts either here in the city or to your knowledge in the state of California to further move in that sort of a direction?
So in Orange County, where they do that work, there's a couple things related to that system. One is they treat it to like a very high level. It's like goes through reverse osmosis and these sorts of things. And they need the water to replenish their groundwater basin. For us, our main pumping is in the San Fernando Basin. So we currently don't have a connection to get to a spreading area in San Fernando Basin, like up to Pacoima or Tahunga.
Yeah.
But we do have a bank of unused groundwater rights. So even at this point, we don't need to spread. You know, we pump through our operable unit, the Glendale Water Treatment Plant and the Glendale operable unit. There's a consent decree, and we have to take a certain amount of water from that plant. Taking that amount of water is a little bit more than our return flow credit, because we get a certain return flow credit based on the amount of water that we sell in the city that overlies the San Fernando Basin. It's a little bit higher than that, so we burn through some of our banked water rights. But even if we ran out of those banked water rights, based on the judgment, we can still pay LADWP, it's called a physical solution rate, for the amount that we overpump. And I would think right now that physical solution rate would still be less expensive than highly treating the water and then pumping it up and spreading it. Mm-hmm. So to some extent, it sort of gets covered by LADWP, really, if we
Right.
pump more than our right in the San Fernando Basin. In the Verdugo Basin, that would be an area that would make more sense to do spreading or some sort of recharge, because the groundwater levels there are dropping quite a bit and we're unable to produce our full right from that. But again, it gets back to that, where would we put it? You know, there's not a good place to spread because even in addition to what Orange County is doing, there still has to be a distance of time, like a few months before where they spread it or inject it and it gets to their groundwater well.
Okay.
Because the aquifer acts as like another barrier of treatment. So there is a spreading basin or just a wide spot in the channel upstream of Oakmont. But the issue in that is our wells are right downstream of Oakmont. So I don't know that there's enough space or time to do spreading there and before it would reach our wells. And then it gets back to that issue that we were just talking about, the weight, right? I mean, the recycled water weighs as much as the potable, so it would be a matter of pumping that recycled water all the way up there and then spreading it and then pumping it back out and using it, right? So you'd have to do those cost analysis of that. So LADWP is looking at doing some spreading from their Tillman plant, which is near their spreading basins, but even that, those are like pretty big projects to do. I think they have some piping in place, but kind of the issue related to that, again, is our salt and nutrient management plan. And it's a question of, should they do the advanced treatment like Orange County to keep the chlorides and total dissolved solids low and not affect the basin? Or are they going to spread a combination of maybe just the tertiary and then the advanced treated? So, I mean, it's a long answer, but I know, at least for our San Fernando Basin, it's really LADWP that's looking at doing some of that. So,
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Nice work.
thanks.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. DeGhetto? Okay, next item.
Okay, 5 is oral communications.
Do we have any cards? Next item.
6 is agenda forecast.
Did we have the final EIR scheduled or not yet? I don't see it here. And I know something's coming up with City Council soon.
That is correct, Commissioner Kaniki and members of the commission. So there is a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with the City Council to provide an update regarding the status of the EIR. And after that time, we have promised to bring to this commission a discussion of the project and the final EIR. I would suspect that the March meeting would be the appropriate time for that. I do want to defer to Mr. Zern, who, as you know, is unable to be here today, but I think that would probably be the most appropriate time to have that meeting, and if not then in a special meeting, but perhaps we can tentatively plan for that as the March meeting date.
Okay. Do we know how complete the work is on the FEIR at this point? Is there sort of a way to describe it in terms of 50%, 80%, 90%? I mean, we must be getting close because we had originally discussed having the FEIR meeting at this February 5th meeting.
Right, so it's very close to being complete. I don't know if I can give a percentage, but it is quite close, and I think there'll be more of an update tomorrow at council.
Great.
But it's very close.
Good. We'll look forward to listening into that. April looks a little heavy, but I think that's fine. At this point, I don't have any changes to our plan. Commissioners?
Just a question to understand on the cost of service analysis. What is that sort of macro timing for that as a project, and when would it go to City Council as well?
Commissioner Camargo and members of commission, that would be planned to go to the City Council in the June timeframe.
Mr., oh, sorry, go ahead.
Timing looks good.
Okay. Mr. DeGhetto, do you anticipate needing to come back and update us on where we are with water at this point?
President Lal, I would think it's really going to depend on, what the state sets as their allocation on the state water project.
Okay.
And then an update from MWD, if that's going to affect us. Last year, MWD was able to store a lot of water and refill and replenish a lot of the storage, as well as some of the other groundwater agencies like Maine San Fernando Basin was able to purchase replenishment water for the first time in a long time and spread it in their basin. And I would think that if there is low precipitation conditions, low snowpack and things like that, it may not have an immediate impact on member agencies. But if it does, I would certainly come back and give an update. And if possible, have some kind of projection. I mean, we can't project what next winter is going to be like, but hopefully it's better than this.
Okay.
Do you need a motion or something? No?
Can I just, one more thought, I guess, related to the COSA, and that would be, so for discussion among commissioners, one thing I'm contemplating is whether it would make sense to have staff, when they start to brief us on the cost of service analysis, to address any lessons learned from the last go-around. Where you recall there was an error that was made. So it'd be interesting to know, from my perspective, what are those sort of lessons learned, and what are we doing to address that? The errors were made, as I recall, by a third-party contractor working under our guidance, our meaning the city. But so that potential, I guess, area of focus within that update would perhaps be lessons learned.
Okay.
Support for that.
Well, I'd like to add to that, if we're doing that and we're doing the COSA analysis, and I assume it's going to be both for electric and water. Here we are about 40 years down the road, and we're going to need to upgrade Grayson, and we have no money. And the COSA is supposed to take into consideration the depreciation of these assets so that we put money aside so that when we need to build it, we are not going out to borrow. Is the COSA also going to take into consideration the appreciation, the depreciation, and if we can concentrate on that area is my point. I'm sure it should, but I'd like to concentrate so that when we are done with this utility at some point, we're not passing it on burdened with debts, but we're passing it on the same way we received it, hopefully with not much debts.
President Lal, Commissioner Kadikian, I mean, I can answer that both COSAs do consider depreciation expense, but one of the things to always consider is many of our assets are beyond their useful life, so they're fully depreciated. So you never want to replace an asset if it's still working, just because financially it's beyond that. So when you look at an asset like Grayson, or you look at many of the water division assets, which altogether are quite huge, you don't go out and replace it just because it's fully depreciated, so that artificially reduces your depreciation expense, and so a lot of times it's hard. I understand what you're getting at. I mean, I totally get that it would be good, ideally, to just accumulate that and replace assets as you go, and then the value of your assets are always at a constant level, so you have that money to do your pay-go and not have to go out and finance some big expense. But I would say that the COSAs are looking at the depreciation, but it's only based on the current book value of the assets that we have.
But we could definitely get into more detail. I don't want to get into too much of a substantive discussion today, but I took a note, and that's something we can include in that COSA discussion.
Very well.
Any further questions, comments on the agenda, commissioners? Okay. Do we need to make a motion for that, or we just move on to the next item?
We can just move on to the next
Okay.
item.
7, adjournment.
So moved?
Second?
We're adjourned.
Thank you.